When it comes to rebuilding the Saints offensive line for the 2024 season, I think there's just varying degrees of confidence of how that's going to turn out, ranging from in some areas high, a lot of maybe, and quite a bit of just very low confidence in what's going on. And I think basically it breaks down into really three topics: what we know, what we think we know, and quite honestly, what we don't know. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So enough can't be said about the importance of the offensive line, the reconstruction of it, the new scheme. We talked about it a lot, but right after minicamp, about a week or so, a few days after, Erik McCoy was a guest on the NOF network, New Orleans Football Network um, podcast. Great Q&A. Highly suggest you go track it down and watch the whole thing because I just wanted a couple of things they talked about at the beginning, or McCoy talked about at the beginning. I think he does a better job than I ever could of telling you kind of what the importance is of this scheme and how he tells us how he thinks or he knows how it's going to affect the offensive line play as we start talking about our confidence and what we know. Well, we know Erik McCoy is the starting center. High confidence on that. He is going to be the leader of this offensive line. Some of the things he talks about is going to be very, very relevant to what's coming up a little later on in the video.
Well, I'll just start off saying that I don't want to be the guy to overhype things.
Yeah.
Because I've done things like that in the past, but I can say that I am very excited about it. And it's been longer than 6 to 8 weeks, it feels like. Because, I mean, OTAs was, what, 5 weeks? But even before that, we were getting in consistent walkthroughs, consistent meeting time. And I think Coach Kubiak did a really good job of making sure that we understood the basis of the offense. But I think it's something that can be really special. And I've said for years, watching teams like the Niners, like the Dolphins, the Texans this last year, like that is a beautiful offense. And it is very O-line friendly, just being honest. You get to run the ball a lot. You get to play action a lot. I feel like that takes a little bit of the pressure off to be perfect in protection. Yeah, and then if you look at the running backs and what the ground game has looked like in these offenses, these guys are putting up numbers. And I think we have an opportunity to do the same thing.
Something we've talked about in the past, in fact, very recently when I did the video on breakout players and kind of stumbled into something he brings up there about the three teams that are going to be closely modeled, or we're going to be closely modeling ourselves off of in the new scheme with the originator and Shanahan's Frisco, and then some of his coaching trees going on to Miami, Mike McDaniel, Bobby Slowick in Houston, and now Clint Kubiak in New Orleans. And when we did that video, we found the numbers, and I had them up on the screen, and the very stuff he's talking about putting up numbers, making plays, and doing a lot of it in the running game and using the running game to set up your passing game. And I'll skip ahead to the video or run ahead into the interview on this video where he gets into a little more detail about that. And I think it's very, very important.
It's been kind of my personal obsession. I feel like you can pinpoint a lot of the problems that this offense has had in the last couple of years. As simple as 1st and 10 runs, it's 2nd and 9, it's 2nd and 10, and leads to 3rd and long. Mm-hmm. Why does this scheme? Why is it going to particularly help this offense in some of the struggles we've seen in recent years?
Yeah, I think the amount of motion that's used is something that'll be really beneficial. And then the fact, like, watching the receivers and hearing the coaching points, you can't tell if it's a run or a pass. And I feel like that is something that'll be beneficial just in terms of that's what I'm looking for. Not giving anything away to the defense. Formationally, and just keeping guys on their toes.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there because he goes a little further, but just that little snippet to kind of pull out and the next couple questions they asked him. By the way, that's Kirk Triplett, Nick Underhill, and Brandon Thomas are the three members of the podcast that are going to be. And I think it was Kirk Triplett that just asked him that question. But he's just kind of laying a little foundation there, broader scheme, basically saying, "Hey, man, they don't know what's coming. They can't. It's they can't predict what we're going to do by what we're doing on the formation or anything else." Which helps out the offensive line, kind of keeps them guessing, keeps the defense off balance. When we've done the videos on the Frisco offense and how they do that with the motion, the scheme, the run blocking, throwing the ball out of RPOs, all that stuff that they do was basically he just kind of summed it up. It keeps them on their toes, keeps them guessing. Now Nick Underhill is going to ask him a question. I think this is really the core of what we're about ready to discuss.
We kind of seen like a slight shift to some of these ideologies last year with the motion and the play action and all that. Like, why do those things help in particular you guys on the offensive line?
Yeah, I think any time where you don't have to drop back 40 times a game, like that's gonna be beneficial. Like, I don't mean to overstate O-line play, but anytime where you have to sit back and drop back 30, 35, 40 times a game, like guys are going to lose. Like it's going to happen. It's NFL. You're blocking the best players in the world. So just getting a mix up and a change up in that, like I think it'll be really beneficial. And I've said that a couple times already, but like pass blocking is hard.
Yeah.
like yeah, you think about it. You're going backwards trying to stop somebody coming full speed forwards.
Right.
Like that's not an easy task. And a lot of times to win, your set has to be perfect. Your hands have to be perfect. Your recovery ability has to be perfect. When you're playing guys like Aaron Donald, when he's retired, but Chris Jones, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, like these guys have rush plans too. Like these guys are good players too. Say I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
No.
And I think really when you're combined what he was talking about earlier, hey, keep them off balance, keep them off their, off of anything we're doing with the formation that's tipping stuff off or being predictable, being unimaginative with your offense, with your play calling, with your scheme, all the stuff we've been talking about, we've been complaining about for the last few years. But what I like to see summed it up with, hey, when that happens, when they're coming, we're backing up in pass protection and they're coming. And he's mentioning some great players saying, hey, they got a rush plan too. They know what they're doing. And they're coming full speed at you because they know you have to throw the ball. It's a down and distance. A lot of what we talked about in the scheme. Got to stay ahead of the chains. Allow them. He talks later on in the interview about how part of their job that they're learning how to do is when it is a pass play, they're selling the run block. He's like, come off the ball, sell that run block hard. So they think you're running, and when Derek Carr's actually going to be back there throwing the ball. Talked about all this. I just, as the guy, and getting back to the confidence, what we know, he's the guy right now in that offensive line. He's the only one you can look at across the board and go, that's the guy. And he's got to be the leader. And I think he has been the last couple of years. And he's one of the best centers in the league. I think he's criminally underrated about how good of a center he is. So everything is being anchored and going through him. And he's the guy that's going to have to lead the charge. Because after him, that's when we go towards what we think we know. But the one thing we're confident about, the one thing that we know, McCoy is the guy in the middle that's leading this charge, and he's telling you why it's important to get this scheme in because, and he said it best, in straight pass blocking like he was talking about, you have to win every single one-on-one. And in the NFL, Very hard to do that, if not nearly impossible. So now we're going to have to move on to the what we think we know portion. And what we think we know when you're talking about the offensive line uh, in this span between minicamp and training camp is Fuaga's the left tackle, Saldiveri's the left guard, Ruiz is the right guard, Penning's the right tackle. McCoy obviously is the center, is high 100% confidence level there. The other four positions, we think we know how that's gonna pan out based on a lot of what was happening in OTAs and minicamp running with ones. I'm going to put a very high confidence in, yes, Ruiz is going to be the right guard, and Fuaga is definitely going to be one of the two starting tackles, more than likely the left tackle. And when you stop and look about or think about what's going on with our offensive line, I don't think that puts us in a very bad position. As long as Fuaga can handle the move to the left side from the right side, which everybody thinks he will be able to. But we'll find out, and I'll put a pin in that because a lot of that's going to cover the third topic. Ruiz steadily has kind of gotten better in his guard play under the old scheme. And more, it seems like this scheme is going to fit him better, and you're going to get better play out of him. That's what we think we know. We'll find out a little more in training camp, so we'll put a pin in that. Now, the other two spots, I'm starting to feel a little less confident. And this is why. And not in that they can't do the job, but that we may have been reading too much in what was happening in OTAs and minicamp, because over and over, especially DA in his questions and answers following practices, over and over, and the other coaches, Kubiak mentioned it, Benton mentioned a bunch of them, but just repeatedly, this is the learning. We're teaching. We're expecting them to learn. It's part of the evaluation process, but it's not the end all be all of evaluation process. That's going to continue into training camp, when they specifically kept saying it gets real, because now we get to put them in pads and see all this stuff we're teaching and they're learning and we're installing. A lot of them are looking good in short shirts and a helmet right now. But when we get to training camp, we get to into July, beginning of August, and we're going to be hitting. And then in preseason games, we're going to be hitting. That's when we find out. And that's really moves us into the questions of what we don't know. Because even though I feel confident Fuaga may be able to handle the moves of the left tackle based on what they're saying, what they're selling us, not going to know until that point. And that's all the stuff we don't know. But there's some wild cards in this whole process. There's four guys that I more or less forgot about because of all the talk of this possibly young running with the ones offensive lines, and they're looking so good in OTAs and mini camps and all that stuff. Kind of forgot there's four more guys that we need to talk about. And they're the four guys that were signed this offseason and brought in, I don't want to say they weren't talked about during that 5-week period in May, June, but not always consistently, not a lot. So what we don't know is really what's going on with them, is because we're kind of guessing they were running with the twos, and running with the ones means, hey, the guys running with the ones must have the lead in on the job. They're in the twos. Well, they're trying to catch up, and all these veterans are running with the twos. So it looks like we're going with the young guys. That may be true. I don't really know, but I think I've backed off on the thought of not accounting for that. The young guys running with the ones may have just been more about giving them the opportunities, because they are young guys, to get most of these reps in this install and in the scheme. Because a lot of these veteran guys we signed have experience with that scheme. And some of them have experience directly with the coaching staff. A lot of them have experience with maybe not directly the Kyle Shanahan coaching staff and the guys that we have on staff here, but through the branches have run across some of the other of the Shanahan coaching tree and including Shanahan senior coaching tree going way back. So maybe a bit of familiarity here. There may be coaches talk. So just saying, the 4 we signed, they might be a little more in the plans than I was maybe initially thinking. But you know what? I don't know. That is definitely a big part of what we don't know. I do know that, I mean, going back and looking at it, Lemieux, Oli Udoh, and Justin Herron, Shane Limeaux, Oli Udoh, Justin Herron, all 4 5-year guys in the league. Lucas Patrick's a 7-year vet. And he's an interesting one because he had 4 years with the Packs, or I'm sorry, 5 years with the Packers, 2 years with the Bears, 2 years with the Bears. Andrew Janako, our quarterbacks coach, was also there with him. Also know that he has a reputation of just being a guy that comes at you all day long. Brian Brzee has talked about that subsequently after we signed him, because when they were locked horns last year in the regular season game against Chicago, and he's like, man, that guy just kept coming. He kept coming. He was relentless. So he has a little bit of reputation coming with him. And I don't know if any of these guys have a reputation of being, oh my God, you have to go sign him, elite all-pro making offensive lineman. But they don't exactly have a reputation of not being able to contribute, not being able to play some. And we also have to talk about Oli Udoh, who his whole 5-year career was the Vikings. In 2021, he was a starting right tackle when Clint Kubiak was the OC over there. And he's also worked with Rick Dennison was there for a while with the Vikings while he was there, our senior offensive analyst, so to speak. But he's a longtime NFL offensive coordinator, a longtime NFL offensive line coach. So it's kind of like Benton, except in a senior advisory role instead of an on-the-field coaching. So I don't know how that's going to shake out. I don't really, and I don't think they know. I think this is all part of the plan to make sure our young guys, Penning moving over, is, hey, we got to make sure he's getting a lot of work. Saldiveri may have a shot at winning that left guard. We have to make sure he gets a lot of work. We have to make sure they know what's going on. If we're going to intend to move Fuaga to the left side and give it a try, let's start early and give him all the work there, and let's get him ready. So basically, when you put the pads on, when it becomes real, and going back to what DA was talking about, the valuation process, everything they've done so far were the quizzes. It was his example. Now, and heading into training camp, it gets really real, and there's your final test to see if you pass, see if you make the team, see if you get the starting job, whatever. And he's quick to point out the stuff they were doing there is important. It's part of your grade. But in the end, this is what they're working toward. This is about ready to start. I think this is ultimately what we're looking for, is the questions we don't know. We would love confirmation on what we think we know. But we definitely want the questions we don't know answered, which is it really the young guys as we were thinking back in May and June coming in, hey, that's what we're looking at? Or is it, look, we just want to put them on equal footing with these 4 guys that by reputation or directly having coached them, we know kind of what they're bringing to the table. So we want the knowledge of the scheme as equal as possible between all these guys competing for those really 3 spots. Because to wrap this up, what we know, McCoy's the starting center. Pretty sure Ruiz is the right guard. And Fuaga is going to play one of the tackles. That's where it starts. We have to fill the other 3 spots. Probably starts with, is he going to be the left tackle? Or we're going to have to move him back to the right tackle and figure out the left side. So it's a weird. So I have 1/5 extreme confidence in the offensive line and McCoy. I've got like another 2/5 of, okay, maybe I think think we may be okay with Ruiz and however Fuaga works out. And then I think that 2/5 of what we don't know that needs to be answered come training camp. Okay, so basically, we've been talking for a while now the importance of the offensive line play, the new scheme. We saw the video where McCoy kind of jumped in and discussed a lot of the stuff we were talking about. And we're confident, at least I am. I'm pretty sure everybody in Who Dat Nation is pretty confident. He's the leader on that offensive line. He's the guy that's going to have to really get it together, move forward. He's definitely locked down the starting center job. And confidence gets a little lower, like we talked about. When you start looking at the other positions, you're stronger in some spots. Feeling good about Ruiz, feeling pretty good about Fuaga, even on the left side, right side, however that turns out. Maybe getting a little shakier and a little more question marks coming in after that. But I think that the important point is, like I mentioned in a video the other day, last year against an easy schedule with really bad offensive line play, you still managed to almost sneak in, win the division, and get to the playoffs. Had you been able to just get average offensive line play, you probably do both. Now, this year's schedule is going to get tougher. Bad offensive line play is going to be a real problem. Average offensive line play improves you somewhat, but I don't know if it helps you a whole lot in the win-loss column. So we really need above average to start knocking the door on good. It's been a while since we could say that about offensive line. Let me know. Give me a thumbs up if you think, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the best confidence that we can pretty much fix this offensive line and get some good play out of it. Let me know if you're 6 or better. Let me know if you're on the positive side of that. I think I am. Hopefully, like I said, come training camp, I'll start moving towards the 10 overall on the line. Go ahead. Please give us a like, share, subscribe, hit the notification. We can, you'll always be ready for any time we've got some stuff coming at you. So, till next time, I'm Tim. Peace out. Who Dat?